effectively, not through direct power, but through gaining emotional access to your triggers. Machiavelli once articulated that the wise individual does immediately what the foolish person does eventually. He meant that wisdom lies fundamentally in exercising control, responding exclusively when it serves your strategic purpose. The fool reacts instantly without thought, while the wise remain perfectly still until the opportune time arrives to strike decisively. Detachment doesn't mean you cease feeling emotions entirely. It means you cease being governed and ruled by those feelings. You can experience pain without drowning in its depths. You can acknowledge betrayal without permitting it to destroy your inner peace. The secret is remarkably simple. You are not your emotions themselves, you are the conscious observer watching them. Every emotion resembles a passing storm system. Loud, wild, temporary in nature. Don't chase the thunder desperately. Stand perfectly still and watch it pass by. That stillness represents genuine power and authority. It's what Machiavelli called the strength of command, the ability to remain calm when everyone else collapses under mounting pressure. People will fear that calmness deeply because they can't read or interpret it, and what can't be read can't be controlled. Imagine this scenario clearly. Two individuals face an identical insult. One explodes in anger, losing control of his image and his words completely. The other looks straight at the offender and simply smiles knowingly. The second individual wins decisively without articulating a single word. He didn't react emotionally. He redirected the energy. He didn't fight. He observed clinically. That represents psychological mastery at its finest. It's not about suppressing emotion artificially. It's about owning it completely. You control what exits your mind, you choose when to respond, you decide when to move and when to wait patiently. That level of control separates the rulers from the ruled masses. Machiavelli advised leaders to appear merciful, faithful, humane, sincere, and religious, and also to genuinely be so, but with a mind so framed that when necessity demands not being so, you may change to the opposite qualities. This means you must know how to detach from your feelings when they threaten your strategic position. If your emotion serves your purpose, utilize it. If it weakens your position, silence it immediately. Emotion must serve you as a tool, not enslave you as a master. Detachment also protects your inner peace fundamentally. Once you cease reacting to everything, life becomes significantly quieter. You cease wasting energy proving yourself to skeptics. You cease explaining to people who will never understand regardless. You cease expecting fairness in a world built fundamentally on power dynamics. Emotional distance grants you clarity of vision. You begin seeing patterns instead of isolated problems. You cease taking everything personally and begin using it as valuable data. That's when you begin winning silently and decisively. When you master emotional detachment completely, you cease being a slave to chaos. No insult, betrayal, or failure can truly touch your core being. You might bend temporarily, but you never break permanently. You move through life with stillness, not fear, because nobody can shake a mind that refuses to react emotionally. The third ruthless principle involves expecting betrayal while trusting strategy instead of people. Betrayal isn't an exception in life. It's a consistent pattern throughout human history. The sooner you understand that loyalty is temporary and conditional, the faster you'll cease being shocked when people turn against you. Machiavelli warned explicitly that loyalty lasts exclusively as long as it serves someone's self-interest. When that interest ends, so does their devotion immediately. To survive in a world built fundamentally on self-interest, you must replace emotional trust with strategic awareness. The wise individual doesn't depend on promises. He builds systems that protect him when those promises inevitably break. The majority of people suffer unnecessarily because they expect consistency in a world driven by convenience. They think loyalty is sacred, but in reality it's conditional and temporary. Expecting betrayal doesn't make you paranoid. It makes you prepared for reality. Machiavelli once said that the promise given was a necessity of the past, while the word broken is a necessity of the present. He meant that people will shift their loyalty whenever it benefits them, and you must never take that personally. Betrayal isn't always an act of evil. Sometimes it's just human nature revealing itself honestly. When you understand that, you cease reacting with anger and begin responding with clarity. You no longer see betrayal as a tragedy. You see it as valuable information. It shows you who values advantage over integrity, who pretends out of need, and who will abandon you when the winds change direction. The most strategic minds don't rely on loyalty. They rely on structure. They don't tie their survival to people. They tie it to systems. When you trust emotion, you make yourself dependent. When you trust design, you make yourself independent. Always have a plan that functions even if everyone turns their back on you. Always position yourself so that no single person holds the power to destroy your peace or progress. That's not cold. It's intelligent. Detachment from blind trust doesn't kill connection. It refines it. You start valuing actions over words and patterns over promises. Whenever you anticipate disloyalty, you cease investing excessive energy into false impressions and fabricated realities. You perceive beyond superficial praise and compliments, recognizing discrepancies in behavior patterns. You develop the capability to interpret underlying motives before they penetrate your emotional core. Machiavelli recognized that anticipation represents the most profound manifestation of authority and influence. A commander who forecasts deception before it materializes never surrenders governance. He documented that the intelligent individual doesn't expose himself unnecessarily to peril, since few matters warrant sufficient concern. Yet he remains prepared during significant crises to sacrifice even existence itself, recognizing that under specific circumstances, survival lacks worthwhile purpose. This philosophical stance doesn't constitute pessimism, but rather embraces realism completely. You acquire the wisdom to care discriminately, protecting your vitality from undeserving pursuits and unreliable companions. The majority of individuals experience destruction, not because treachery occurs, but because they decline to acknowledge its possibility. They inhabit denial until the metaphorical blade already pierces their vulnerability. The Machiavellian consciousness eliminates that delusion entirely, accepting human inconsistency as an established truth and preparing accordingly for inevitable shifts in allegiance. You don't construct impenetrable barriers around your emotional center. Instead, you establish controlled entrances that unlock exclusively for individuals who've demonstrated their faithfulness through extended periods and challenging circumstances. Even in those instances, you never disregard the reality that any person possesses the capacity to transform. That perspective doesn't represent cynicism, but rather authentic authority. It signifies remaining vigilant yet not embittered, exercising caution yet not displaying coldness, maintaining awareness yet never exhibiting weakness. When you anticipate disloyalty, you cease experiencing terror regarding it. You transform into something psychologically impenetrable because nothing startles you anymore. Your calculated approach transforms into your defensive shield, while your mental lucidity transforms into your protective armor. You no longer pursue faithfulness desperately. You demand admiration through your composure and thorough preparation. Because the individual who forecasts treachery never submits or kneels to its occurrence. Within a turbulent universe, composure represents the most frightening manifestation of fortitude. The majority of individuals mistakenly equate tranquility with vulnerability and softness. However, Machiavelli perceived it as an instrument of psychological combat and warfare. When you project serenity while surrounding individuals experience panic, you communicate superiority without articulating a single syllable. The tranquil consciousness observes what the agitated cannot perceive. The calculated thinker identifies arrangements concealed behind emotional turbulence. When you can project serenity amid disarray, individuals begin experiencing apprehension regarding your governance. They perceive that nothing possesses the capability to disturb you, and that enigmatic quality transforms into dominance. Machiavelli documented that a ruler must acquire knowledge of how not to demonstrate goodness. He didn't advocate cruelty. He emphasized emotional discipline and the capability to disconnect from benevolence when it undermines authority. Demonstrating kindness proves effortless, but maintaining calmness when everything combusts surrounding you achieves divine status. When individuals anticipate your collapse and you remain steadfast, their perception of authority over you disintegrates completely. Composure terrifies the unstable profoundly, causing the impulsive to hesitate significantly. They cannot comprehend why you don't respond emotionally, why you don't engage in disputes, why you don't crumble under pressure. That quietness transforms into a reflective surface mirroring their internal chaos. Your stillness reveals their absence of governance. Society respects the individual who remains centered under mounting tension because such composure proves exceptionally rare. Most consciousness serves as slaves to immediate response. They vocalize excessively rapidly, determine conclusions prematurely, and sacrifice everything to emotional impulse. The calculated strategist pauses deliberately, examines circumstances thoroughly, and selects precisely when to advance. Patience doesn't signify vulnerability. It represents governance over temporal progression. Machiavelli once articulated that the lion cannot safeguard himself from entrapments, and the fox cannot protect himself from predatory wolves. One must consequently become a fox to identify entrapments and a lion to intimidate wolves. That equilibrium necessitates a tranquil exterior and a calculating consciousness beneath it. You must project tranquility resembling water, yet maintain sharpness resembling ice below the surface. Individuals should observe no indication of your internal cognitive processes. Never reveal tension, uncertainty, or terror. Allow them to speculate whether you even experience it. The less information they possess about your emotional condition, the more unpredictable you transform. Unpredictability constitutes authority, forcing others to engage on your established terms. To project calmness, you must initially train your internal dialogue and voice. Every irritation, every disparagement, every unexpected complication must be confronted with one fundamental inquiry. Does responding assist me in achieving victory? If the response proves negative, you remain silent deliberately. That quietness unsettles individuals more profoundly than anger ever could accomplish. A calm response terminates disputes more rapidly than aggression. The calculated consciousness doesn't pursue triumph through verbal exchanges. It achieves victory through energy management. Even when surrounded by antagonism, maintain your vocal pace slow, your visual focus steady, your physical gestures minimal. Confidence is transmitted through stillness, not auditory disturbance. This principle doesn't concern concealing emotion, but rather mastering presentation. You must govern the theatrical display of your existence. What individuals observe should perpetually serve your strategic advantage. Project rationality when others demonstrate irrationality. Display amusement when they anticipate fury. Advance slowly when they hurry frantically. Demonstrate that you are never influenced unless you deliberately choose to be. Gradually, this atmospheric presence transforms into armor. Nobody comprehends your fracturing threshold because you never disclose it. You transform into the calmness within every tempest, the observer among reactors, the strategist among casualties. Quietness doesn't represent emptiness or vacancy. It constitutes governance in its most concentrated manifestation. The more extensively you communicate, the more extensively you expose yourself. Every superfluous utterance transforms into a transparent opening into your consciousness. Once individuals can interpret you, they can forecast you. Machiavelli comprehended that authority is preserved through enigma and mystery. He recognized that quietness doesn't constitute an absence of communication, but rather a deliberate strategy of supremacy. When you vocalize less frequently, individuals begin imagining more extensively. They populate the quietness with their own anxieties, uncertainties, and presumptions. That ambiguity transforms into your strategic benefit. The quiet individual is never disregarded or ignored. He's studied, examined, and discussed in whispers. Society underestimates those who articulate minimally until they execute action. By the time they do, it's already excessively late to prevent them. Utterances prove inexpensive. Everyone employs them to pursue validation. However, authority doesn't explain itself. When you rationalize your selections, you grant others permission to evaluate them. When you engage in disputes, you acknowledge that someone else's perspective matters. Quietness destroys that perception completely, transmitting a transparent message. You don't owe anyone comprehension or understanding. Machiavelli once stated that nothing great was ever accomplished without peril. He signified that even constraint carries vulnerability, but quietness represents a calculated vulnerability. It invites misinterpretation, but simultaneously commands apprehension. Individuals don't fear what they can forecast. They fear what they cannot interpret. The quiet individual who absorbs more than he articulates transforms into the most hazardous presence in any environment because everyone speculates what he's contemplating and what he's orchestrating. To master quietness, you must initially overcome the compulsion to prove yourself. Most individuals vocalize to safeguard their pride. They explain, defend, and exaggerate to project control. However, every explanation reveals insecurity. The Machiavellian consciousness has no such requirement. It vocalizes exclusively with intention, exclusively when the result demands it. You must acquire comfort with pauses, with the tension of unspoken utterances, with permitting others to drown in their own auditory disturbance. When you maintain quietness, you compel others to expose their contemplations. You discover their vulnerabilities while safeguarding yours. Quietness transforms conversations into reflective surfaces that reveal the authenticity of others, but never yours. In negotiations, disputes, or confrontations, quietness manipulates the battlefield. It causes the impatient to disclose excessively. It causes the arrogant to surrender governance. Every second you restrain your vocal expression, they demonstrate more of their strategy. Machiavelli's philosophy thrived on systematic observation. The quiet observer perceives everything the vocal forgets to notice. You can interpret micro-expressions, vocal shifts, inconsistencies, details concealed from those excessively occupied vocalizing. Quietness doesn't represent absence of authority, it's its concentration. Like a blade sheathed yet prepared, it retains energy without squandering it. Never underestimate how quietness shifts perception dramatically. An individual who vocalizes rarely is presumed to contemplate profoundly. Their utterances carry significance because they prove scarce. You don't need to be the most intelligent in the environment. You just need to be the one who doesn't need to vocalize. That alone separates you from the impulsive and the insecure. Gradually, quietness transforms into your identity. It makes you unpredictable, respected, and feared simultaneously. When you do determine to vocalize, your voice penetrates the atmosphere like a weapon because it's employed with precision, not habit. Authority isn't loud. It's measured. Presence forfeits significance when it transforms into constant. The more accessible you are, the less you are respected. Machiavelli comprehended that scarcity constitutes the essence of influence. He recognized that a commander who manifests excessively often transforms into ordinary. However, one who manifests rarely transforms into a legend. Absence doesn't signify withdrawal. It's strategy. It generates distance that cultivates curiosity, authority, and yearning. When individuals can't perpetually reach you, they begin imagining your significance. They replay your utterances, examine your quietness, and anticipate your return. That anticipation constitutes authority. Every great strategist recognizes that timing matters more than frequency. Manifest excessively, and your presence forfeits its significance. Manifest selectively, and every entrance feels like an occurrence. The weak crave perpetual attention because they fear being forgotten. The strong withdraw deliberately to make their presence heavier. Machiavelli once stated that individuals are driven by two principal impulses, either by affection or by terror. The wise individual comprehends that absence can generate both. When you disappear, individuals either miss you or fear forfeiting your favor. Both emotions grant you governance. Continuous exposure dulls mystery completely. When individuals know everything about you, they cease respecting you. However, when you transform slightly out of reach, they begin imagining more than they know. That imagination strengthens your image far more than visibility ever could accomplish. Absence also safeguards your consciousness from noise. Constant interaction drains focus and exposes your patterns. The Machiavellian thinker values solitude not for comfort but for recalibration. When you remove yourself from the crowd, you regain perspective. You begin perceiving what others are excessively distracted to notice. The crowd advances by emotion. The detached consciousness advances by clarity. To master absence, you must acquire the ability to retreat without explanation. Don't announce your quietness. Don't rationalize your distance. Simply vanish when necessary and return exclusively when your presence serves a purpose. Those who notice your absence reveal who values you. Those who don't reveal who never mattered. The rarest consciousnesses comprehend the rhythm of presence. They know when to advance forward and when to vanish. Machiavelli advised rulers to manage visibility carefully, understanding that distance sustains authority. Drop this affirmation in the comments. My consciousness submits exclusively to my authority. Achieving psychological imperviousness doesn't signify experiencing emotional emptiness whatsoever. It doesn't indicate transforming into someone frigid, merciless, or separated from authentic existence. It signifies that absolutely nothing, no disparaging remark, no act of disloyalty, no disappointment, possesses the capability to govern your being. You transform into the sovereign commander of your responses, the proprietor of your concentration, and the designer of your tranquility. Every obstacle transforms into educational wisdom. Every confrontation transforms into analytical information. Every barrier transforms into an occasion to strengthen your governance. Machiavelli instructed that authority is acquired through rigorous discipline, systematic observation, and calculated strategy, never through fortunate circumstances or fleeting approval. When you implement these principles, you don't merely endure within society. You navigate through it possessing authority, lucidity, and unbreakable composure. Remember perpetually that governance originates internally. When you establish dominion over your consciousness, no external situation possesses the strength to disturb your foundation. Detachment safeguards you completely. Quietness magnifies your influence. Absence elevates your significance. Composure intimidates adversaries. Strategy protects you from treachery. And perception sculpts reality surrounding you. Each principle reinforces the others, constructing an impenetrable fortress of psychological fortitude that cannot be violated. The impervious consciousness doesn't respond reactively. It dominates through presence, preparation, and patience. You cease responding to existence and commence directing it. If you discovered significance in these principles, execute action immediately. Activate the approval indicator to demonstrate your dedication to evolution. Distribute this content with someone requiring awakening of their internal strength. And subscribe to this platform because mastering consciousness represents a continuous journey, never a singular instruction. Every subsequent presentation will refine your comprehension, broaden your strategy, and fortify your determination. Quietness, strategy, self-governance, that constitutes the pathway of the impervious individual. Enter it deliberately, construct it methodically, embody it completely. Allow society to examine you and observe as nothing possesses the capability to disturb you again. Document your declarations through commentary, allowing the utterances to resonate within your consciousness and pledge to governing yourself initially. Because the instant you possess your consciousness, you possess everything.